say a word about the Desmond O'Grady exhibition of his books and some artifacts inside there. And I'd like to thank William O'Neill from the People's Museum for putting the exhibition together. And it fits in nicely with the efforts that the Limerick Writer Centre has been doing to promote Desmond as a Limerick poet of note. President Michael D. Higgins unveiled a heritage plaque for us outside the White House Bar in 2014 as part of our literary walking tour. And our international poetry competition has begun very well. Eleanor Hooker was our judge this year, and she'll be announcing the winner later on. I'd like to thank Kieran Bevel and Jerry O'Brien's family for donating the books that form part of the exhibition. And yeah, we hope to add to the exhibition in the future when we get more books and more artifacts belong to Desmond. And it's going to have a permanent space here in the museum, which is great. Okay, so I'll hand over to Tom to take a good rest of the evening.
Thank you, Dominic. The Limerick Writer Centre presents, as part of Berlitz Poetry Month in Limerick 2023, the Desmond O'Grady Memorial Reading. This reading commemorates the late Limerick poet Desmond O'Grady. O'Grady, who was born in Limerick in 1935 and started writing poetry in his teens. This early work was strongly influenced by T.S. Eliot and Ezra, whose poems he encountered at weekly meetings of the Limerick Poetry Circle in the White House Bar. At the age of 19, he moved to Paris to teach English at the Berlitz School and to immerse himself in the artistic life of the city. He met Picasso, moved in the same circles as Beckett, and in 1956 got to know friends of Joyce and published his first work, Chords and Orchestrations, with the financial assistance of his admirers at home in Limerick. Desmond O'Grady was unusual among Irish poets of his generation for both his interest in modernist experimentation and his immersion in the poetry of other cultures. He was, in the true sense, a citizen of world poetry. Tonight, our guest readers for this event are Jamie O'Halloran, Kieran O'Driscoll and Eleanor Hooker. American-Irish poet Jamie O'Halloran is the author of the 4 chapbooks, including Corona, Connemara and Half a Crown, a winner in the 2021 Food Poetry Competition. She has published widely in Irish, UK and US magazines, including Banshee, Poetry Ireland Review, 14 Magazine, One Hand Clapping and the Night Heron Barracks. Her poems appear in a dozen anthologies, including Romance Options and Local Wonders from Daedalus Press. She was 2021 Artist-in-Resident at Bridget's Garden in County Galway and is a recipient of an Arts Council of Ireland Agility Award. She lives in Connemara in the Bover River with her husband, 2 donkeys and 1 cat. Ladies and gentlemen, Jamie O'Halloran.
Thank you very much. Is this good?
Yes,
Okay.
get a bit closer.
Get a bit closer. Not used to these things. Thank you so much, Dominic, for the invitation. I'm really honored to be reading really illustrious company. I'm thrilled at it, and thank you for the introduction. I'm going to read a bit first from the chapbook, Corona, Connemara, Half a Crown. This was written Corona, Connemara, so January of 2020. So this, it's after we'd gone into that next lockdown and couldn't go anywhere. It was very cold, and it was January in the west of Ireland. So it's a double crown in that there's sonnets. If you're not familiar with that form, the last line of the first poem becomes the first line of the following poem. And it continues that way for 14 poems. And the last poem ends with the first line of the very first poem. And then there's a 15th poem, which is considered called the clasp, to this garland or necklace. And that includes all of the repeated lines. So I'll read a few from here, and then the half a crown continues that idea, but it's not a full double crown. And these poems are, they're numbered in the crown. And I have an epigraph from Marilyn Robinson from her novel Leela. What use was there in calling a day by a certain name, or thinking of it as anything other than weather. 1. If it weren't for the cold, the short days, one might not guess it is winter. All seems green, hedges and fields, even the leafless limbs of beech wear green lichen gloves. Spears of crocus and narcissus poke through unfrozen soil. Each morning, as the sunrise creeps back, I check for the latest risen congregations of stiff foliage where blossoms will open like choristers. Closing in on my first full round of seasons in this new place, I still learn what grows when and where. Blanket of alder leaves feed the meadow. Wild carrot will tail hyacinth and bluebells. This year of grief isn't ending, but brightening. 2. This year of grief isn't ending, but brightening, with its earlier sun and later moon. We drove to the bends last evening. The sight of them sifted with the morning snow, the last we'd catch until this next lockdown is lifted. We'll trace our local loop, learning the hedge by heart. We caught the best a day could bring, with the shower ending as the sun was settling deep into Connemara, a rainbow arched across the all of Mon Valley Bog. Holiday closures will stay this month, tight as a bud, while the snowdrops ring their shy white bells. By February, March, we may get the jab. If nothing else, sons of Narcissus will nod, cradling the lights we lost. I'll read one more from this in this section. Sons of Narcissus will nod, cradling the lives we lost. A calendar's been flipped through, and the flowers' yellow cups are mementos of the season when this plague was truly novel. What I remember, an assortment of weeks, months, days that opened and closed like the push-pull scales of a concertina, like the locking of lungs swamped with fluid. Cough not deep enough for worry, flushed from heat, not fever, salt, sweet, sour, bitter, articulated still. It is not my beloved's suffocation. It is not my beloved's lonely suffocation. It is the moment when the corps of nurses and doctors abandon one bed for the next, again and again. Wards all but morgues as we careen into spring. I'm going to move into reading some from the Half Crown. And these have been titled, and the first is St. Bridget's Eve. What is bright today are maize-colored ribbons of witch hazel blossoms streaming against the oyster sky. At the church, we set 3 wicks to flame at Our Lady's alabaster feet, setting off prayers for the friend in stage 4 we'll Zoom with next week. I'll point my phone to show him the snowdrops and sweet box. I'll want to see if, as usual, he has wintered their kitchen into a hothouse of paper whites. Nothing is usual. He'll talk about women's basketball, which composer pulls him deeply. And when the talk turns to his wife, their sons, their babies, our smiles will struggle to witness light, the old one that flowers even in the dark. And, in the introduction you heard that we have 2 donkeys, so we have a place for hay. Lean to. Hush of the hay shed, where slices of light limit the rain. It holds a thick quiet. I tell my partner, this is where I'll meditate without candle or burning incense. What dumb-bound scent could be more worthy to offer than this once field folded into flakes, trussed with orange twine into bales stacked 3 high. Nourishing shelter you are, a soft grotto, a grassy shrine without distraction. The storm-fast river and jackdaws are unheard here. As children, when we played sardines, that backward hide-and-seek, I would choose a closet shelved with out-of-season wool. The light wept in under the door. It was safe as our held breath. If our seekers had been diverted, how long would we have kept our silence? And I'm going to read, I'll come back to that at the end, but I'm going to read a couple of other, some newer things. These next two are not part of the series, they're just on their own out there. This is called Leaf. It is the coming and going I mind most, not absence or abundant presence. Mind as in attend to, not mind as in bothered. It is the singular leaf I most admire. The fallen oak leaf, green, abandoned, is a perfection of shape, elegant in death. It is a word flying out of my mouth like a page torn from a book, like the blue-lined fool's cap I call loose leaf, papers linked to tea. It is this leaf and others of its kind I harvest from their snug in November for bedding narcissus when good and moldy. It is the gold leaf, the skin for gilding and stamping incunabula, edging missiles, for floating in Goldschlager, bright as ash. It is the oaken leaf stored in the closet until the whole family must be seated together. It is what brings the leaf to be. This next poem, well, it's more personal than others, and I'm kind of happy. It's going to be in this issue of Banshee that's coming out. It's called Look Away. Tomorrow, a remote relative flies in with his fledgling daughter, the girl who held my husband's hand as they walked up our street, hopping over every crack. She was the first he could stomach, since our daughter, his flesh, my prize, left. How polite that is. Before her brain and heart fought and we lost. Under intensive care, she was a confusion of wild hair, and those eyes, her leaf green eyes, unopening in the snow-cold room. If I capture her here, will that help? If he can give that niece our daughter's poo and his Swedish red horse. Somewhere in this house I've stowed photos of our girl before I knew her, paddling on the Hackensack, her hair a feral pyramid, her glance like mauve. 3 photos snapped in a single push or pull of paddle, her head almost turning in the flat, glossy print. The horizon at her shoulder of the river, its mossy bank, and sun wanting, look away, look away, look away. And she did. Her bright coat reckless, her looking past the afternoon she curled into, hooded, nothing to say, studying floorboards, looking away, then driving away and away. Then it was towards and towards, here, here. How quiet it was when she was done looking and her car met the wall, when it all stopped. But it never stops, the looking. Here, here, away, away. She is this, and those, and here. Look, look. her eyes in his green. Look at her hair in his empty hand. Just over a year ago, when Ukraine was invaded, I started writing. I was doing a daily writing practice for them in March and started in February, of course. But and I was writing a lot of poems beginning about that, responding to what was hearing in the news, of course, not being a witness there. And this is called Eastern Frost. The grass was milky this morning, lightly iced. Venus was bright before the sun in a vacant sky, just below freezing, and the morning chorus was hidden, heard, full-throated. The sky was adamant blue, no huff coming from a winter gust. I pruned hydrangeas, potted chives, parsley, tethered a pink rose to a stone wall. The afternoon was bright, dry enough to hang wash on the line. I shredded cabbage for white bean soup, set the table. Who is tending the gardens of Kharkiv? Are birds singing in Kiev? This is another coming. Today's Angelus is a thin plonk, like the piano tuner's persistent playing of one black key. Reminder, it is said, this midday chime of the unexpected, where you might be scraping a carrot or reading a book and some lambent angel materializes right there in front of you with a life-shattering pronouncement, like the invasion of a sovereign nation or the shelling of hospitals and sunflowers. Bethlehem is now. And, a lot of things I was hearing, reading things in the newspapers, hearing on the radio, and this next poem, Fast Cars Go Dangerously Around Every Bend. I was listening to Ray Darcy on the radio, and he was interviewing a woman who had gotten out of Kiev, and the title is a music theory mnemonic for the order of sharps. Fast cars go dangerously around every bend. I heard the woman on the radio, fresh from Ukraine, tell how she left with the city crashing around her. She sounds like this happened decades ago. I heard her say, a helicopter fell in the key of the sea, and overnight we spent on the floor. What I heard is not what she said. A helicopter fell in the Kiev Sea. This morning I listened to wind-scored music for cedar, ash, and beech. I couldn't tell the key. The limbs made a kind of singing, and leaves a sort of hymn. And as thousands and thousands of families, households in Ireland, we welcomed refuge from Ukraine, refugees to our home, a single mom and her young daughter. So a couple of things here. Refuge. Expect trauma, they tell prospective hosts. How do we translate comfort, safety? Interpret, make yourself at home. Best not say the word, that not of the left behind, the forsaken life. What is the fare of returning? What is the cost of staying? And I'll have one more if I forget. Actually, due to unforeseen circumstances, we had a plumbing disaster in our home, and so our guests had to relocate. And as it would happen, it turns out a neighbor just around the corner is taking it, and they're moving in this weekend. Okay, this is house guests. She draws a family of 4, but we've seen only 2. The 4-year-old tells me who is in her picture. Mama, me, Papi, Nana. We know that Nana is in Kiev, and Mama wants her to leave. We heard Mama say husband once. It is not for us to ask. It is not ours. It is our home to open. And then I'm going to read, let me read one more of these. One more kind of reminded me of another one. So, this is called Dreamt Again. The wind shuffled the roof tiles like a shaky gambler dealing the aces away. That gust pricked my dream with a random signature. I fell then into a vision from one of the other wars. Clay tiles studded nothing like missiles over Baghdad, except in my nightmare where my worries erupted like bolts from an IED. A hawk traces O's of wonder and hurt, the stunning quiet of clattering clouds in the oak-framed eastern sky. And I'm going to read just one more poem, and I was timing this one to be sure. I just turn this off so I don't get some inappropriate tone coming up or something. So yeah, this is from the back of it's the closing poem, and it seemed because we're coming up to the 1st of May. This is Belton. Rest my head on a sun-wrapped pillow tonight to coax an easy sleep. The fresh breeze does the drying when the air is still cool. Fixing pegs on the line requires so little movement. Blue tits pecking at the feeder aren't bothered. A birder says it's not that robins bear affection for us, but that we present no outright threat. Our harm filters to them through the slaughtered hedgerow, ridding their wild of food and shelter. What we take for beauty in their singing is a fierce claim, warning to enemies and rivals, not courting ballads. The pheasant's rusty shriek turns the lock of summer, not the cuckoo's come on of his name. I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jamie O'Halloran. Kieran O'Driscoll was born in Callan, County Kilkenny, and lives in Limerick. He's a member of ASDA now. He has published 6 collections of poetry, including Gog and Magog, Salmon, 1987. Moving On, Still There, Deadless, 2001. And Life Monitor, Free Spirits Press, 2009. His work has been translated in many languages. Liverpool University Press published his childhood memoir, A Runner Among Falling Leaves, in 2001. His novel, A Year's Midnight, was published by Pig Hog in 2012. He's won a number of awards for his work, including the James Joyce Prize and the Patrick and Catherine Kavanagh Fellowship in Poetry. His most recent collection is Angel Hour, Sort of Vision 2021, from which 5 poems were included in the anthology Contemporary Surrealist and Magical Realist Poetry, Lamar University Press, Texas, 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, Kieran O'Driscoll.
I'm going to read, I think it's 5 poems. I find it hard to get started, but once I get started, I'll be grand. My book, called The Angel Hour, because of COVID, I didn't ever get around to have a launching here, and this is the first night I've had the opportunity to talk about it in Limerick. But it's divided into 7 sections, and I'm going to read poems from not all of the sections, but what I will do is I read poems from some of the sections, and then I'll talk about poems that I wrote later and what sections they might have been in if they had been written earlier. Right, so the sections are Elements, Angel Hour, which is the same title as the book itself, Hard Lines, Halfway Heavenwards, Interior Man, Journeys, and Psyche. The first poem I'm going to read is from Elements, from that section. And it's appropriate at this time of the year because we get April showers at this time of the year, so it's called Sometimes Rain Comes Like This. Sometimes rain comes like this, a gentle shower that's hard to beat for calling things to order. It calls my heart to order. I listen and am moved. No argument more powerful, it calms me to compliance more willingly than downpours, comes unannounced and soothing. The riddle of its falling makes mystery easier. I see what should have been a standout all along. It touches everything, and so I am touched by everything. An all-embracing murmur, an omnipresence tapping on my inmost being's door. It throws a veil of comfort over the garden and trees, darkens the sandstone paths, postponing work and weeding, and without a word being said, calls amnesty and rest. Sometimes rain comes like this. And my wife is here tonight, and I'm sure she'll be picking out one line in particular there, postponing work and weeding. This poem is called The Heart and the Wall, and some of you are probably aware that on the wall of Scoil Carmel and O'Connell Avenue there is a heart-shaped stone which every now and then is recovered, repainted a bright pink. I used to notice it every day when I was teaching in the College of Art because I'd be waiting for the bus, and there it was. And so this is a sonnet that I've written, and in the first part I just described that situation, and in the second part I actually make up a story to account for it. You know, it's just my story that accounts for it. The heart in the wall. In the boundary wall of a convent school close to my home, there's a heart-shaped stone beneath hanging leaves. At times half-meshed in sleep, I'm waiting at a bus stop by the wall to join the morning rush hour's obsequies and notice that the stone has been redone bright red. The scroll of teen initials gone. A valentine shines nameless under boughs. A boy once loved a girl who took the veil, choosing the ghostly company of saints. An old man now, at night he travels still, once or twice a year, to rejuvenate the heart contained within the convent wall. Somebody holds a torch for him. He paints. And this one is called The Man Who Went to Emmaus. This is, I spent 10 years in a religious order, and God, I'm kind of glad, eventually glad that I left it. And now, of course, here I am with death facing me and looking me in the face. Such is life. Anyway, this story in the, I forget whether it was in one of the Gospels or whether it was in the Acts of the Apostles, but the story about these two guys walking to Emmaus from Jerusalem, and they were overtaken by this other walker who turned out to be Jesus. It's always one of the things that has remained with me through the years and through the decades. The man who went to Emmaus was not harsh, although he suffered fools with some impatience. He couldn't stand hypocrites, however, and lambasted the scribes and Pharisees, who were the archetypal hypocrites of his time. He called them whited sepulchres, full of dead men's bones, a phrase which didn't sit well with the same scribes and Pharisees, and as a result they had him crucified. But believe it or not, he rose from the dead and presented himself to two disciples as a stranger who, like them, was heading to Emmaus. And they continued together discussing the previous Friday's tragedy. And he gave them a hard time about how foolish they were and slow to believe. But it wasn't the same kind of hard time he gave the Pharisees. It was the kind you'd give to acolytes slow on the uptake. So they asked him to stay the night and have some supper with them at the local inn. And to cap it all, he blessed the bread and wine. And that's why one of his dining companions in Caravaggio's early painting has his arms stretched out wide as the dining room, and the other is gripping the arms of his chair and staring at their fellow traveller as if he had been gaping at a ghost. And in one way he was, but in another he wasn't gaping at a regular ghost, but a man whose body, risen from the dead, possessed a greater subtlety than before. And that explains how, after he had prayed over the bread and wine, he disappeared, leaving his dumbstruck friends to contemplate a turnaround of biblical proportions. This one is from the section called Hard Lines, and it's a sonnet. It's an unrhymed sonnet, which means it's not really a sonnet, proper sonnet at all. But you could say it's 14 hard lines. And it's called Nothing Happened. I was pussyfooting past the central bank, as one does, because it comes down upon one passing by the central bank. The word pussyfoot palpably enters the mind. And in my earphones, the talkers were talking of what's being rolled out in the pipelines, mincing their words and their metaphors. Then, suddenly, nothing happened. It made me think of Kavanagh frozen on a canal bank seat, and the three-syllable word homelessness. How relatively reticent are sheep compared to dogs or cats. People should not take bullshit from the laws of gravity, I thought, as I pussyfooted past the central bank. This one is one of my new poems, and if I had written it before the book was published, I'd probably put it into the same category as the previous one I've just read, the Hard Lines poem. G.K. Chesterton, in a very long poem of his, has one stanza which is relevant to this poem. I tell you naught for your comfort, yea, naught for your desire, save that the sky grows darker yet and the sea rises higher, which is very relevant to our current situation. to introduce this as, instead of hearing the sound of one hand clapping, I'm constantly hearing the sound of a lot of things slipping. For example, the Arctic ice, kindness, the size of chocolate bars, morality, friendliness, and many others. And this poem is called Press-Ups, and in order to coat a bitter pill with a sugar coating, I've used a very beautiful form called the villanelle, which originated in France sometime in the 16th century. Press-ups. The rustic pans of childhood are no more. The social order's up against the wall. I'm doing a pile of press-ups, muscle sore. The scent of polish on the timber floor tickles my nostrils as I rise and fall. The rustic pans of childhood are no more. Better to be prepared for what's in store than hear the doorbell ring your final call. I'm doing a pile of press-ups, muscle sore. A Yeatsian beast patrols the deep heart's core, and tribulation threatens one and all. The rustic pans of childhood are no more. Prophets who cry disaster are a bore. They might as well be talking to the wall, or do a pile of press-ups, muscle sore. And yet, Cassandra couldn't put out pour her utterance of Troy's tremendous fall. The rustic pans of childhood are no more. I've done a pile of press-ups, muscle sore. And finally, this poem is called To My Wife at Camber Beach. Camber Beach is in East Sussex, and we spent a few days there last summer with my son's partner and our grandson. And Camber has a very long beach, 2 miles long. That's 3 kilometers, I think. But we used to go out walking separately, Margaret and myself, because she's still quite speedy, whereas I've slowed down. But sometimes I see her coming back, so this is quite fun. And I'm trying to make her out because she's so far away. Is that her? That looks like her walk. Maybe it's not her, you know. I know her from a mile, I always say, when I go out and glimpse you coming back. And it's true, although at times I'm not fully sure until your hair begins to take on colour. Isn't it good to think the one you break your bread with can be known from far away? Precarious are the pathways that we take, the cargo that we're carrying so frail on these perilous expeditions. What I'd give to be able to alleviate your mind with something in the slide and slip of words that lets the door swing open. You who have been travelling with me all this way and wide, who have been out with me on these long sands. Thank you very much.
Eleanor Hooker is an Irish poet and writer. Her third poetry collection, Ochre and Ash, Dennis Press, is the recipient of the 2022 Michael Hartnett Award. Her other 2 collections with Dennis Press are A Tug of Blue and her debut, The Shadow Owner's Companion. which was shortlisted for the Strong Shine Award for the best first Irish collection. Her chapbook, Legion, Bonifant Press, Netherlands, was published in 2021. Eleanor is currently a PhD candidate at the University of Limerick. She began her career as an intensive care nurse and trained as a midwife at the National Maternity Hospital, Dublin. After Eleanor is finished reading, she will announce the winner of the Desmond O'Grady International Poetry Competition 2023. Eleanor Hooker.
Thank you very much. Such a joy to read with Jamie and Kieran. Thank you. Wow. Beautiful work. I get super nervous before readings. It's ridiculous. I'd rather launch into a Force 8. But anyway, here I am. I'm going to start with an origin poem. People are writing them all the time, so here we go. Self-portrait in the honeybee's eye. In the version my mother tells, one hung in the still air, hummed above my crib, its saddlebags yellow-laden. She shooed it, she says, but not before it tasted my lip. And that is why, my mother says, I am chosen to wheedle with words. I recall its curved fur, and my infant reflection repeated in its compound eyes, how it hung in the air, still above me, and when it landed, the secrets that tumbled from its saddlebag drove into my lip. And that is why I speak messages from the other world to this. It is why, when in my honeybee coat, you cannot know me, but grasp the sting deep inside me, may eventually kill me. And as I tremble from flower to the skies, lost in the copse of words, I am who I am. We have 2 dogs at home, and they've got a lot of attitude. My dog, Prof, short for Professor, I bounce poems off her, go for walks. She's got attitude, and she's a voracious reader, and she's an eclectic taste in reading. So this poem is called My Dog is Reading Nietzsche Again. I'm standing in the basement. The rooms above are packed with emptiness and silence. My life is hanging off its hinges, and my dog chooses to speak. Inexplicably, my dog chooses to speak in my other voice. I ask her, why speak now? She says the moment seemed proportionate. She sniffs the air, tells me she detects dread. May I? She asks, and when I nod, she walks in. So this is the hollow room, she says. Is this not every room in the doll's house you never owned? And as I'm not permitted to speak in the hollow room, I nod. Was it ever thus? She asks. I point to the mirror, its black canvas. A nightmare, she says. She taps the glass. The barometer needle falls and the atmosphere fails. Then the storm, and then the rain. I remember the caress of rain, that old comforter. She taps again. We watch time rewind, and those I've loved and lost arrive to take their seats in the delicate trees in the hollow room. They laugh, make meaningless bird sounds, sip the tea I serve with being dead. They cannot see me. Make it stop, I say, and she does. Eventually, grief is the only spectre, and but for the echoes and incessant rain, nothing remains in this room. I need to see it, my dog says. Take me to the ballroom. We wait at the threshold. The dance is never ending. On one side, my many selves weave back and forth, tethered to an inaudible tune. And on the other, my many doubles regard us, tired of the same routine. These are not the facts of your life, my dog says. Only interpretations. And those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music, she says, and I know she's been reading Nietzsche again. As we return to the edge, my dog inquires if I'm still dyslexic. I ignore her thoughtlessness and stride ahead, persistent. She asks if I've heard the joke about the insomniac, dyslexic, agnostic, about the girl who kept from sleep, wondering if there really was a dog. I ask my dog if she believes he's dead, and she says yes, he's dead. I was an intensive care nurse in the 1980s in Dublin, and I think things go around. There's epidemics of the COVID virus, but back then there was an epidemic of loneliness, and farmers were coming from remote parts of Ireland to come to us in intensive care, and they had taken paraquat, it was a weed killer. I don't know if I should say that in camera, but that's what they were drinking, keeping it in orange juice in the barns and drinking it. And there's a compound that we make up called Fuller's Earth, which neutralizes the effects of the weed killer. But the first aid treatment, and a lot of people didn't realize, was to pick up scoops of earth and make the person eat it, because it neutralizes the effects of the paraquat. And this man I've never forgotten. I hope well, I'm sure he doesn't mind it. But anyway, this is called eating the earth. And actually roosters, kerpinks and queens are formed of potato, in case you didn't know. Eating the earth. Turning soil to plant roosters, kerpinks and queens, my spade scores a rock hunkered in the dark. I lie down, burrow my arm to the collar, grip the stone smooth as a shoulder, long since inhumed. After recent rain, the earth smells good enough to eat. I settle the soil around me as I did as a child on the beach at Spanish Point, reaching down to shipwrecked sailors I imagined buried in the sand. My dog rises from his resting place, attempts to dig me up, and when I say no, he drops beside me, licks my face and smiles. He's 7 and newly mastered his smile. His tongue lolls from one side of his mouth to the other, grinning now, a fan of this singular species of crazy I exhibit. Clutching his leg, his elderly sister runs beside the trolley, cries, "Hold on, Paddy, you'll be grand. Hold on, love." He's moved from the ambulance directly to us in intensive care, mud and grit round his mouth, and in his sea green eyes, ghost ships sail into view as he struggles and fails to catch their mooring lines. His sister knew enough to make him eat the earth, to check the fires rising inside him, weed killer burning life from his every organ. I coax him to eat the fuller's earth I'd prepared, to put out remaining fires. He calls me Missy, apologizes for the trouble. He holds on. As we undress him, farmyard falls brown from his boots. We admire his sister's darning at his elbows and over his heart. Parsley's fog watch for the safe. Stop time. Soon his voice sings of loneliness and incessant rain. When all that's left for us to do is take his pain, we do. And when he says he didn't really want to die, we hold his hand, listen. And when all that's left for us to do is lay him down to rest, we do. He sleeps beneath the earth, a clay blanket over his bleached bones. Dusk is daylight unremembered, and in the dark soil, touch is all that remains. I find him seized, the rock a hand that grips mine at the wrist, gently at first, that grows me towards it, makes me one of its secrets, roots me to the vernacular of the earth, on whose life my life depends. I work with an American artist called Judy Tominic. She makes a painting and I make a poem, or I make a poem and she makes a painting, and it's a really great relationship. And she made a poem called Well-Worn Wings, which is just a lady, drop foot and patched wings. I just loved it, because I love the idea of imperfect angels, or imperfect people. And this is called Well-Worn Wings, after Jeannie Tominic. That cabinet in my mind, where I put the things I'd rather not consider, is almost full. Row upon row of stones, stacked behind its vast yew doors, collapsing on themselves daily. like bones in a graveyard. The cabinet sits above high water, in a back room named Unutterable. I didn't name the room, and I don't know who did, but I'm conversant with its synonyms. The creature that guards the room is not an eel or a terrible fish. It just is, and occasionally is not. Where I trace the damp blue walls, a soft mould chalks the paint with my impressions. The room is a dark and broken sea, where disturbed waters drown time. I catch sight in my well-worn rings. Their hooked veins patched blue and green, old wounds. With effort, they wrench me from the water's pull, settle me on a rusty pecan protruding from the wall. Nearby, all my birds, obsidian and raven, call, "What? What? What? What?" at the question of my unsettling. I unfeather back to the rakas. I pluck quills from my shoulder bones until, dismantled, I am back at source, flightless, woman, and unutterably sad. A few years ago, I was asked to write some poems to celebrate Dante's 700th birthday. I thought that was kind of a cool thing to do. And so, have you heard of Bishop McQuaid? He had a kind of a long finger into everybody's life.
Talk about Mada. I heard her name.
Well, I'm not a fan. And so, what I'm doing, this is taking on the Inferno, and Erin, obviously an Albury for Ireland, and her bishop, Mr. McQuaid. And he wrote letters, and if he was sort of pissed off about something, he'd say His Grace is displeased. That's how he'd start the letter. And so people had to adjust whatever law or provision for women's health in the Constitution because he spoke. So this is called Inferno, Erin and her bishop. 9 times down, I walk the frozen lake, where to fall is to fall through. Eternally east of me, my heart, stopped by snow, feathers my flight. Conscience is my guide and constant, my unfaith inspired holy huts. I walk the frozen lake 9 times round, where to fail is to fall away. And then, sounds of this dead world carry the wind inside its desolation. In speech lies our stuttering origins, and there is Erin and her archbishop stopping the ice. She grinding his bony crown, glubbing clotted sap, and him drivelling. His Grace is displeased. His Grace is displeased. When she senses me, she leaves off her frenzy. He sold my children, she screeches, spitting jelly brain, and those he didn't sell he starved, and those he didn't starve he buried in his bowels, oh fetid burials. Her own betrayals are stones that dam her eyeless sockets, and when a tempest fetches groans to stay her torn mouth, she returns to her gnashing. Beneath my feet, beneath the freeze, bodies of 10,000 naked sorrows bump the ice, hold their infant breath as they flow away from Erin and her bishop. Am I doing okay? You know that the movie and the book, The Help? And you know when she reads the terrible awful, when she sits up in bed and goes, "Ah!" Anyway, she does. And so I wrote a poem from my husband, and it's called Love Song, and he had pretty much the same reaction. When, "Oh, you wrote about us and you didn't tell me, now it's in the book." And so he can't be in the room when I read this at reading, so he's not here tonight. So I'm going to read it. And it's called, and when we first met, I was reading Thomas Kinsella, and he read the poem for me. And I mean, God, that's a real, if you're into poetry, that's a real turn on. Other people maybe not. But he read that poem, and there's a line in the poem, "We've locked ourselves inside one heart," and I use that at the front of this poem. So those are not my lines there, so Kinsella's. Love Song for Peter. Remember when I came to you, clothed only in catastrophe, you whispered, "If I embolt my heart, you must walk through or walk away." Remember? and once inside we coupled, unlearned the sad refrain we once called loneliness. We became the boat, reefed our sails in squally weather, sailed our course together. When judgment fell and the fleet railed, recollect your family's good name, wear your class, remember. You gave my tears to the sea, and the sea wept. They hauled our sheet through the block, and when our boat luffed, we corrected. We stemmed the line, and after the wind arrived as huge silence, I asked if we could ever be becalmed, and you said no. We've locked ourselves inside our heart, remember. This is a strange one, but anyway, I'll read it. I don't know what to say about it, except it's called Encrypted. They put us in the crypt, my twin and I. She died before we were born, many years ago. I eat the dark so she can see me. She plucks an acorn from my iris, says my eyes are the precise colour of forest floor she'd imagined. Tugging at my raven wings, she asks to keepsake one black feather. She swims in my sea skirt, and when she tires, gathers perfect pebbles. A collector, I think. I resolve to collect you too, she murmurs, counting 6 fingers on her left hand. Later on this year, I've got a chapbook coming out called Where Memory Lies, and it was a book that was written as part of the Markovich project. I wrote poems for 5 women who had really unspeakable things happen to them during the War of Independence and the Civil War, and one of them in our home. And Eileen Quinn was a lady who Yeats wrote 2 poems about, in fact, and her great niece, Orla Higgins, has done an RTE documentary called Reprisals. She's an incredible woman. And during the war in Ukraine, that picture of the woman being carried out of the maternity hospital, and you know, anybody who's in the medical profession took one look at her and thought she's not going to make it. She was so shocked, but things haven't changed. Eileen Quinn was shot in the groin, no exit wound, was 7 months pregnant, and basically exsanguinated. So I asked the photographer of that picture if I could use it, and he didn't get back to me. I mean, he didn't get back to me. He's busy being a war photographer. But this means that, you know, in war, nothing really changes for women. It's for anybody, but it's for women. It's a particularly horrible time. So this is called. It's a sequence of 3, but I didn't want to ventriloquize the women. So what I do for the 3rd poem is do a mini play where I use the archives and put the voices back into the voices of the women, so they're speaking them, not me, or imagining how they would. So I'll read, and this is in the latest issue of Agenda. It's Patricia McCarthy's last issue as editor, and she was one of the first people to ever give me my first break by publishing me and being massively encouraging. It's called Mother and Child for Eileen Quinn, 1920. War. If war is a death bird that drops death seeds, Armageddon will bloom. If war is a killing bird that looses long-range ruin, masonry will fall to reshape a skull, a pelvis, a town. When war takes aim, its shells seek the sacred hearths where 2 lives breathe as one and bleed it. When war is a death bird that lands, it will push orcs from its bowels, send them forth to feed their savage craving for women and for innocence. Reprisal, Court, County Galway, Monday, November 1st, 1920. Eileen Quinn, age 24. In your eyes, Eileen, the straight Gort road. In your arms, your youngest child. By your side, Alfred, aged just 3, and your infant girl, and growing inside you, new life, 7 months long. There is no back or bend in that road you watched for Malachi's return. Did you hum a gentle phrase, or a song, or favourite sonnet for your young? Comfort against the howl bad times make. Rough firing pistons signalled 2 costly tenders, ferrying animus. Drunken D Company seeking reprisal. They shot up the square in Gort, but a square remains a square a psalm no king could dare to rule. On one account, the first truck slowed, a creature clambered down, knelt, steadied himself, took aim and shot you through your groin. No exit wound. He mounted his war horse, cantered idly on. 5 hearts, 1 beat, your children's cries, blood on the path, the maid, a child herself, gathering chaos in her arms, brought you into the chaise longue. Your children hurried to a room upstairs. Father Considine, kind soul, local midwives, Dr. Sandays and Dr. Foley, unable to pause a catastrophe, and Malachi, inconsolable, and your attempts to console until 8 hours passed, then you and your baby. I wish I could write, really funny poems and make you all laugh, but messed up, I can't. So this is a kind of one, so I'll finish on this. It's called Guardian Angel. And when we were kids, we were told, Santa was the guy who could see if you'd been good all year and maybe you wouldn't get something for Christmas. And the guardian angel was the guy who sat on your shoulder and was pervy and followed you everywhere. So then I saw artwork by Guy Denning, who's a British artist who lives in France, and he does monumental angels in charcoal. They're gorgeous, they're like Adonis. So I thought if I was going to choose a guardian angel, I'd choose that guy, the Guy Denning's angels, because they've got attitude. So this is called Guardian, thank you. This is called Guardian Angel after Guy Denning. Mine is perpetually undressed, though not ingloriously so. He's illustrated too, yet I can tell he's new to 2 paradises here. Does not improve his spirits. When he displays his charcoaled wings, the wrench of skin, feather and bone makes it sound like splintering wood. I hear him mutter, "Fuck, that hurts." He shaved his head when I shaved mine, age 22, and though my hair has grown back, still he calls me Baldilocks. I've been called worse. With a devoted sense of wickedness, he feeds rosemary to lambs. He's seasoning, he winks. No salvation for the lamb. He's at his most morose in a boat. It reminds him of biblical times and fishing trips that brought him little cheer. He gets cantankerous at my dithering, tells me I need a swift kick up the arse. You must rid yourself of your demons, he chides. What? I snap. I lose you. It was such an honour to be asked to judge the Desmond O'Grady International Poetry Competition this year. Oh wow, the poems were... The standard of writing was hugely impressive, but the 2 themes that emerged from the poems was of loneliness and grief. These themes were handled quite magnificently throughout, as myth, as raw heart-stopping instance, as metaphor absorbed in nature, as recollection, and as marvellously surreal interpretations of self and loss. All of the poems submitted to this competition sang, and those poems whose lyrics stayed in my mind and to which I returned frequently to reread were the commended poems and the winning poem. And now I'm going to talk about the winning poem. I hope I'm pronouncing these correctly. Airmead in the Glen. The poem I've selected as the winning poem is a beautifully balanced poem. Grief at sibling loss and the powerful affirmation of the healing power of nature is told in the myth of Earmid. Earmid was the Celtic goddess of healing and a member of the Tuatha Dé Danann. When King Nuada loses his arm in battle, Earmid's brother Much fashions one of flesh. Earmid brings it to life with her restorative powers. Their father, Díolchelt, kills Much in a jealous rage and buries his body in the battlefield. He scatters the medicinal herbs Earmid draws up from his burial place so that future generations may not know the curative power of plants. Airmead in the Glen is narrated by the grieving Earmid, and even if one isn't aware of the myth, the exquisite language the poet employs to sing its tender song captivates the reader. What appealed to the ancients was the portrayal of Airmead as a kind and gentle woman who was altruistic and who sought to heal without thought of reward or favour. What appeals to me in Ermid of the Glen is that the poet absolutely captures the essence of all of that and in oh such beautiful poetry. And so I wander bog roads, wade through lakes, hair mingling with flowerwort, orbit forests like a planet searching for its moons. And later in the poem, the poet writes, a robin presses his fluttering heart to my palm, perches on the bough of my lifeline. Man, I could steal these lines. And so we'd like to invite Niamh to read your poem, if that's okay. That's, and I'll get out here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm so honoured. Thank you, Eleanor, and thank you to the Limerick Poetry Centre. And I'm glad that you described Armid because I wouldn't know where to begin. So I'll just read the poem. Armid in the Glen. And so I wander bog roads, wade through lakes, hair mingling with bladderwort, orbit forests like a planet searching for its moons. My winged companions, gannets, merlins, meadow pipits circle my path, flock to lift my spirits from the mud. I tell stories to anyone who'll listen, how he could climb like a squirrel, build like a beaver, fashion a limb. Worms rise towards the rainfall of my tears. Wrens bathe in the salt pools of my clavicles. Bats fold in the caves of my clothes. A robin presses his fluttering heart to my palm, perches on the bough of my lifeline. I can't plant breath in the lungs of the dead, but look, cackling geese point north, their beaks like compass needles. At nightfall, owls summon shapes from the dark. Thank you very much.
We have two highly commended readers now. Billy Fenton. Or have we?
Thank you, Pery, thank you, Eleanor, and thank you, Dominic. So before I read this, I'd just like to say a little bit about it, if I may. I was going up the River Barrow by boat a few years ago. It was 6 or 7, maybe it could be almost 10 years ago now. And I stopped at one of the villages along the way. We went to the pub and I was talking to this guy, and he happened to be from the same town I was from. And we started talking, and he was maybe 2 years, I think, younger than me. So obviously we knew a lot of the same people. And we started talking about school and going to school. And we both remember this particular brother who was pretty vicious. And during the conversation, he actually broke down. So this would have been 40 years after the event, when we had been, well, he would have been 2 years after me, probably, with this particular brother. But he broke down basically in the pub. And we didn't have that much to drink now, maybe after 2 or 3 pints or something like that. So it always kind of struck with me, you know, what was this? And the subsequent conversation suggested that his whole life had kind of been steered by this particular brother, I suppose, really. And he never married, and became quite reclusive and so on and so forth. So I began to kind of reflect on my own, the effect it had on me, because I know people of a certain age kind of remember when these kind of events happened. And I'm not talking about sexual abuse, I'm talking about just physical and emotional kind of stuff. And I suppose this poem comes out of that, really. So it's called Forgives. Years stamped out by a polished boot blackened the concrete yard. By the door used to enter, splinters of glass, a mischief of mice run down the windy corridor. The door of room 4 hangs from a single hinge, a grey Venetian blind creaking. On the blackboard, faded words, God forgives you. The man rubs out each word, sits on the chair where the teacher once sat, eyeing up young prey like a hawk stealing a breeze. He stares at the place where his own desk once sat, a boy, his body bruised like thunderclouds, his eyes waved shut by dried up years. Sinead?
Thank you, Billy. Felicia McCarthy.
Good evening. Let's see. I imagine most of you have been to Inchbotham, and if you have, you know exactly what I'm talking about now. East End, Inchbotham. There is no anchor but a boy to moor the long black boat, no mast nor master, tied by a thin line. She turns and spins at the whim of the moon and the wind. Neither tight fastened nor free, she waits to break away from the sheltered harbor. The widow stands at the door, studying the tides until her children call her back inside. Thank you.
Well, this was the Desmond O'Grady Memorial reading, and you've been listening to Felicia McCarthy, Billy Fenton, Niamh Toomey, the winners of the aforementioned. The guest readers have been Eleanor Hooker, Kieran O'Driscoll and Jamie O'Halloran. The next extravaganza in this cultural epicenter will be on Friday night when Tim Cunningham will launch his latest offering.